It is finished.
In this resolution, the international community condemned the Iranian attacks by ballistic missiles and drones against GCC countries, and it called for halting them immediately and for respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. The international community condemned these dangerous attacks. There were very clear positions from a number of states and international organizations condemning this aggressive behavior. This proves that the attacks by the missiles cannot lead to any legitimacy or friendship.
The story of America's presence in Bahrain did not begin with a warship. It began with a doctor, a healer who came to cure. On December 7, 1892, missionary physician Samuel Zwemer arrived in Manama. He was the first person to bring the flag of the United States to Bahrain. The US flag then bore 44 stars, each a state, the 44th for Wyoming. When America's first delegate arrived in Bahrain in 1892, Britain had already been on the island for more than 20 years. Both came as saviors, but under different disguises. Britain under the naval crest, America under the doctor's coat. After the weakening of Iran's Safavid dynasty and the tribal uprisings across Bahrain, power shifted restlessly. From local tribes to Oman, from Oman to Iranian Zand governors, then back again in rebellion, and finally to the arrival of the Al Khalifa family from Qatar, seeking rule. These were Bahrain's transformations before Britain's formal occupation. And in their traces, the British signature was already visible. At that time, Bahrain was not yet independent, still regarded as part of Iran. But the Al Khalifa family itself was divided, breeding internal conflicts so deep that foreign powers found their invitation. After roughly a decade of civil war and violent local uprisings, the Royal Navy appeared, under the pretext of protecting the trade routes to India, Britain's prized colony. Most claimants from rival Khalifa branches and other tribes were arrested and exiled to India. Now Bahrain lay like a cleared land, its former structures erased, ready for rebuilding. Britain chosen a young, non-native ruler, Isa bin Ali al Khalifa, and placed him under its protection. The Royal Navy served as the ultimate police, suppressing revolts, securing the dynasty's power. The great nation builder had begun again, the project of creating a synthetic country on a fragment of Earth. Each time local tribes fought to overthrow Al Khalifa rule, Britain resecured this imported structure. Warships returned, as in 1869, to crush rebellions, especially those at sea. Back then, Bahrain's heartbeat was the sea itself. Pearls and marine treasures formed its economy. Its survival came from ships and guns, not soil or natives. And amidst this turmoil, the American doctor Samuel Zwemer continued his mission. Soon after arriving, he opened a small free clinic in Manama's market, a place where every patient was treated without cost. Step by step, synthesis advanced. Within the British atmosphere, an American layer began to take form. The first humanitarian American presence on the southern Gulf, decades before oil or military fleets. But Zwemer was not only a healer, he was also a Protestant missionary. As others joined him, their presence expanded, eventually forming the American Mission Hospital in Bahrain. Yet Bahrain's deep Shia faith and civilizational attachment to Iran challenged this synthetic nation project. Zwemer's prescription wasn't new. It was the localized version of Moses Mendelssohn's 18th century Haskalah concept, de-religionizing identity, de-civilizing heritage, while reconstructing ethnic and territorial identity in its place. He administered this medicine drop by drop, long-term and deliberate, continued by missionary doctors until a turning point arrived. Year 1948. At the same time the Zionist state emerged in the Holy Land, Britain began to quietly withdraw from the region, making space for the American spirit to replace the British one. It was like a relay race. The baton passed on. But the change needed a public pretext. America found its reason in the looming Soviet threat. Thus was born the Middle East Force, Mideast IV. For the first time, US Navy ships such as the USS Rendova declared their permanent presence. By then, America's flag bore 48 stars, but new, invisible ones were beginning to appear. One of those unseen stars was marked in 1948, the same year the map of the Eastern Mediterranean was redrawn. Eyes across the Gulf watched the American flag rise over Bahrain, guarding the oil lifelines of the world. "22 years after 1948, after the founding of Israel and the flag's rise in Bahrain, the CIA sought to secure its naval base through a deeper design, introducing yet another synthetic nation. Bahrain's internal politics were engineered to guard US naval installations, as if history repeated itself, only slightly altered. This time, the search for pearls wasn't beneath the waves, it was for the true pearls of the region to be caught for America. Then came the generous offer to Iran's Shah, a proposal colored by veiled threats. If Bahrain is not surrendered, they warned, the 3 occupied islands and Kark, Iran's vital oil base, will be targeted. Operation Diplomatic Pressure commenced. The Second Pahlavi yielded, agreeing that the separation of this sacred Iranian soil and its conversion into a synthetic state be placed before the United Nations. Voting session, UN General Assembly, 1970. The UN officially recognizes Bahrain's independence from Iran. Through a swift and orchestrated UN poll, the CIA opened a path that wasn't true independence, only a change of landlord. The migrant tenant's lease was renewed under new ownership.
In 1970, further cooperation led to the declaration of Bahrain's official membership in the United Nations in 1971.
4 months later, America signed the Jufair Agreement, guaranteeing that the US Navy would inherit Britain's bases, both land and sea. And thus, Jufair was born. When Britain completed its withdrawal from Bahrain in 1971, the cutting of this Anglo-Saxon umbilical cord was executed with meticulous precision. Within months, America entered Jufair, activating the CIA's plan to ensure that the Gulf's most strategic pier would never fall into Iranian or local hands. On August 15, 1971, a synthetic country emerged as a US military base. Because a special flag had been made for it, no new star appeared on the American flag. Less than 25 years later, with the establishment of the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, the final phase of the synthesis was complete. The product was ready, and it began to operate. A synthetic country, one that even many Arabic speakers for years referred to as the Israel of the Persian Gulf. A tenant attentive to its landlord. In the early years after independence, in 1975, the country dissolved its first parliament in order to safeguard the presence of the US Navy. A tenant who, whenever threatened from within or beyond its borders, was shielded by the forces of the landlord. In 2011. During the wave known as the Islamic Awakening, the landlord's allies intervened, led by Saudi Arabia, to suppress protests in Pearl Roundabout. The objective was clear: to ensure that the headquarters of the US Fifth Fleet remained secure. A country that, in practice, had become a military base with residents living inside it. A structure increasingly reminiscent of another model, the one implemented decades earlier on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. When King Hamad, on September 15, 2020, signed the Abraham Accords and announced Bahrain's accession, it seemed less like a new decision and more like the unveiling of another localized version of Moses Mendelssohn's formula. With the beginning of the Israeli regime's attack on Iran in June 2025, and Bahrain's radar support extending up to a 5,000-kilometer range, the last appearances of Bahraini neutrality vanished. The synthetic country, the artificial fortress, was finally being used for its ultimate purpose. Roughly 9 months later, on February 28, 2026, war erupted between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other. With America's open entry into the conflict, the synthetic country visibly began the mission for which it had been created. Iran's response was not unexpected. The headquarters of the landlord's Fifth Fleet, NSA Bahrain, along with other assets belonging to the landlord, became targets. The tenant, seeking to defend its landlord, brought a proposal to the same United Nations that decades earlier had recognized the change of landlord while preserving the tenant. On March 11, 2026, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 2817, introduced by Bahrain. The resolution invoked Article 51, affirming the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense in response to what it described as egregious attacks by Iran. In a resolution that represents the tenant's final attempt to provide international legal cover for the actions of its landlord. Without this paper shield, and without the continued military backing of the United States and Saudi Arabia, the political structure established in 1971 faces an uncertain future. Now, the world watches to see whether a resolution written on paper can save a synthetic country built around a military base. For the first time, the formula of Moses Mendelssohn and the Haskalah movement has entered into direct and comprehensive confrontation with the Iranian model. At last, 2026 may mark the end of something in the Persian Gulf, and one of them is the US military base synthesis country.